You know, I like all the Tex Avery cartoons where you don't really see the adults except from the knees down. And yet I didn't want to make the adults' cartoons in E.T. I simply did not want to show their faces except for Mary.
This is no room. This is an accident.
You know, Mary being, you know, Dee Wallace, who did an amazing job, because in a way she was a kid too. I always thought that Mary was a kid too. She was suffering a divorce, and that kind of reduces you to childhood impulses and choices, because your emotions take over from your roles as a caregiver and a parent.
He saw me playing a call girl on an episode of Skag, which was a series with Carl Malden. But Stephen hires essences. He saw the essence, the heart of the character that he wanted.
Do you believe in fairies? Say quick that you believe.
I do.
If you believe, clap your hands.
I knew after the first read, I called my agent and my exact words were, this film could change the world. I knew. I always knew. I don't know why anybody else didn't know. I did. I mean, I don't think you ever know that the public is going to embrace a film like they did E.T., but I certainly knew that as far as the script was concerned, the possibilities were all there.
The first time you see another adult, the face of another adult, is when Keyes walks into a close-up and he's inside the protective clothing. And that's when you see the adult world starting to consume the world of children.
There's no response to 20 per kilo. Let's move to hypertonic sailing.
Mike Fenton was the casting agent, and he was a fan of mine, and he believed that I was destined for great things. And one day he called me up and he said, do you have a fedora, you know, a kind of Dick Tracy hat? He said, grab it, and I want you to come audition for Steven Spielberg for a new movie he's doing. And he was auditioning for Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was outside, and Steven was in a room kind of like this, surrounded by these light stands and curtains. And Mike said, just stand behind the curtains, and I'll introduce you, and you step in. I cocked my hat, and I flipped my jacket collar up, and Mike said, Steven, I want you to meet Peter Coyote. And I stepped in, and your audience can't see, but all these big light stands have these long, angled legs that stick out. And I walked just like this, and I tripped over one of these legs, and I came careening into the room, stumbling and falling over. Could not be the farther away from an action hero. And Steven was sitting down kind of looking at me like, why is this guy here? What is he doing here? But I guess we talked, and I guess he remembered something of me, and then I was told he also saw me in Southern Comfort. And the next thing I knew, I got a call for E.T. You know, I'm only seen from the waist down for half of it. I got a letter from an old girlfriend who said, I recognized you the moment you came on screen. I read the script. They sent a messenger up. I'd never had that experience, and he sat in my living room while I read the script, and then he took it and he went back. And I got it.
But his being here is a miracle, Elliot.
I knew what it was saying, I knew what it was about, and I wanted to be in it. Of course, I knew Steven Spielberg, and I just have always felt that when great directors call you, you just gamble with them. You know, you just, if they're going to jump off a cliff, you jump off the cliff. And I felt that way about Spielberg.
E.T., can you say that? Can you say E.T.? E.T.
E.T.
It was tough writing a good look for E.T. because I wanted E.T. to be special. I didn't want him to look like aliens from other movies. I wanted him to look so anatomically different that the audience would say there's no way there's a person in a suit with a zipper up the back. And that's why I wanted to make the neck very, very slender and very long. I wanted people to say, oh my God, there's nobody in that.
At the beginning, we tried a whole bunch of different kinds of things. We tried a bunch of different kinds of heads.
And I began working first with Ed Verreau. And Ed did a lot of sketches of E.T., a couple of which are pretty interesting precursors to what Carlo Rambaldi came up with. I brought Carlo on board because Carlo had worked with me on Close Encounters, and he began to work on E.T. in clay.
I watched this picture back to me, the neck and the face. This paint was in the Academy of Fine Art in Bologna, in Italy. I realized that maybe it is a good idea, very original for extraterrestrial. Small neck and face protruding head. I make 3 little models in clay with little different anatomical point. One skin, one little fat, another, etc. With different dimension of the face.
And I refined it until it was something that I wanted, something that I could relate to, something that only a mother could love.
Steve come many times in my shop for see the model in real size. And I have just 3 months time for finish everything.
My fear was the audience would never love E.T. because he was so off-putting, the way he looked. And my hope was that they would love him within 15 minutes of meeting him. I expected, because I designed the film this way, for him to be scary when we first meet him. But as Elliot slowly starts to understand that there's no threat here, and that E.T. is the most magnificent curiosity of his young life, I would hope the audience also would be breathing the same kind of life into E.T. from their own points of view. And they did, and that's what was important. E.T. wasn't cute.
Elliot, look what I made for you.
And Michael screams, say no to Michael.
The whole premise of the film hinged upon that believability.
Cut, great. Beautiful.
And that's why it was so important for Steven to really get the look down for E.T., get the design down to where people could believe that it wasn't just a guy in a suit. That's why the eyes were so important, and why we did a lot of takes of E.T. enunciating the words correctly with 12 guys working in unison.
E.T. phone home.
Faster.
E.T. phone home.
E.T. phone home.
If we had a pile of rubber there, you know, just pulsating and blinking a lot, and I wasn't emoting anything, it wouldn't have worked.
A real concern was just how much of E.T. do you see, particularly at the beginning. We're barely going to see him at all. That he stay very much in the dark. He would have a backlight. There would be something that would just give a reflection in his eyes and a little bit of shape to his face. Every scene started with the same question: where's he going to be? Because the mechanical E.T., he'd have to be anchored to the floor. Our sets were all raised on a structure so that the cables could be snaked around out of the set without having to cross the floor, so that we would literally have a hole drilled. E.T. would go in that, the cables would run out and go to the operators. And the operators viewed E.T. most of the time via remote video cameras, so they could see what he was doing. And their sense of synchronization had to be so perfect.
It was never a thing to me. It was never a machine to me. It was E.T. There was a soul there. That's the only way I can explain it.
Look way up. Way up. Okay, now look down at the remote control. Look at the remote control. Good. Taste it.
I think Steven, all of his efforts to keep the people that controlled E.T. off the set, you know, the wires were hidden, they were behind, so you never were really cognizant of people running E.T. It was just E.T. being. And I think that helped all of us.
Okay, here we go.
No.
Okay. Please.
Okay, stand by.
Where's my
Right here.
voice of RCA? I had to figure out ahead of time when I was going to use the little people, when Caprice was going to use her hands and mime, and when I was going to use the fully mechanized character. I had to work that out ahead of time because it took a lot of time putting everybody in the suits. And then we had a young boy who didn't have legs, and he walked on his hands, and he gave E.T. the most amazing life. And when we used him primarily when E.T. had had a few too many and was stumbling around the kitchen.
Ball forward. Cut. Okay. Now.
Sheerly by walking on his hands, he gave E.T. an amazingly out-of-this-world walk rhythm. And Tammy and Pat Bylon, you know, did some amazing work in the E.T. suits. And they were troopers because they were sweating in there. And they had to carry a lot of, especially when we were using the electronic head, that was 12, 15 pounds on Tammy and Pat's own heads. And that was very, very hard to do. And we had to give them frequent rests, but they stuck with it to the very end and they made it happen.
I need you to pretend that it's nothing more than an animal. It's some sort of a deformed cross between a coyote and a rabbit. All of a sudden it's showing great intelligence. And that cracks you up.
Henry, he'd already done quite a bit of work with the ET, and so I kept asking him, you know, how does it work? What does the neck do? I know that, you know, have you seen the heart light up yet? And he wasn't telling me a whole lot, and he was saying, you know, you'll see. And I think it might have been on purpose, but that first scene that I see him in was the actual first time I saw the creature. And this thing comes out, and it was just unbelievably real. I mean, there's no way to describe how magical it was to have something that alien, that bizarre, actually working with you. That was just invaluable because it would react to things we were saying, and we could react to its reactions, and it was just like working with another actor.
In the closet, fast!
E.T. was absolutely real to me. I understood that it took mechanics and some people being in his suit and a woman doing his hands to make him manifest and come alive, but I just thought that he was a guardian angel, very real to me, and a good friend, and someone who was teaching me a lot about love and how to take care of someone and how to treat people. And because he was there, because he wasn't computer generated, I mean, he was a very real, tangible being, and that's something that, you know, in this day and age in our technology, we don't have that luxury anymore of being so intimate with, you know, an alien, so to speak. And that makes him all the more real.
Picture Monday and I haven't finished this yet.
Touche!
Ever since then, I've been giving up.
You saw people coming over and powdering his face and adjusting the wig when he was dressed as the old bag lady, and you saw, you know, E.T. being treated with respect and dignity. You know, I think the entire crew did give E.T. his dignity.